All right, Georgia's on the road in Lexington. Saturday night, a primetime game. The Dogs taking on the Kentucky Wildcats. Georgia's first SEC game of the season. Kentucky, of course, already played an SEC game, an absolute beatdown last week at the hands of the South Carolina Gamecocks. Also in Lexington, an embarrassing performance by Kentucky. We're going to talk about it all in today's video, but first, a shout out to today's sponsor, Prize Picks. Make sure you check out prizepicks.com. They're the absolute kings of daily fantasy sports. You guys have been asking me about player props in fantasy football forever. Well, here you go, prizepicks.com. Make sure you use the promo code Uncle Lou. It couldn't be any simpler. Step 1, make an account. Step 2, make a deposit. Step 3, place any $5 bet. Step 4, they're going to give you $50. It's that easy. Doesn't matter whether you win or lose that initial $5 bet. They're going to give you a $50 bonus. Make sure you use promo code Uncle Lou. That's prizepicks.com. And I'm going to show you how easy it is right now. Using the Georgia-Kentucky game as an example. It's literally as easy as picking a player, picking a stat, and choosing more or less. It couldn't be any easier. So Carson Beck, quarterback of the Dogs. Over 212 yards passing. Do you think Carson Beck will have over 212.5 yards passing against Kentucky? If you do, you bet more. Carson Beck, 250.5 yards passing. Will he have more? Will he have less? Bet it either way. Green Goblins are easier bets to win. Carson Beck over 199.5 pass yards. Pretty confident that would hit. Green Goblin means it's easier to hit. The payouts are also a little bit lower. The Red Devils are harder to hit. Over 299.5 yards passing for Carson Beck. Red Devil. You know what? I think Carson Beck's going to go over 300 against Kentucky. You make between 2 and 6 picks. And it doesn't have to be Georgia. Doesn't even have to be the Georgia-Kentucky game. It can literally be any game you want. Trevor Etienne, running back for Georgia. Over 49.5 rush yards. That seems pretty easy. I'm going to go with more. $20 would win me 80. It's literally that easy. You make between 2 and 6 picks over at prizepicks.com. They've got all the games, all the players, all the sports, everything you want. Daily fantasy sports, the absolute kings. You want your player props. You want your daily fantasy football. There you go. Make sure you use promo code Uncle Lou. Again, create an account, make a deposit, make any $5 bet. They give you $50. It's literally that simple. PrizePicks.com, promo code Uncle Lou. All right, now let's talk about this game. Georgia on the road in Lexington, taking on the Kentucky Wildcats. Disappointing is an understatement for Kentucky's performance last week at home against South Carolina. Kentucky's had some bad teams throughout their history. There's no question about it. The Stoops era, though, has seen Kentucky elevate their program to a level that it rarely has seen before. Not that they're winning SEC championships or making the playoffs, but they've been a consistently good team. Have they been great? No, but they've been good. 8+ wins, a couple of 10-win seasons. They've been ranked in the top 10 a couple of times, finished in the top 15 a few times. They've had some good seasons under Stoops. It does not look like this is going to be one of those seasons. Last week's loss at home by Kentucky to South Carolina was probably the worst game I've seen Kentucky play in almost a decade. It was really, really bad. They struggled to get out of their own end zone. It seemed like every time I looked up at the TV, Brock Vandagriff was standing on his own goal line in a shotgun taking a snap, and boy, he did not play good at all. He looked terrible, and it doesn't give me any pleasure to say that. I like Brock Vandagriff. He, of course, was at Georgia for 3 or 4 years, kind of stuck behind a couple of other QBs, and got to the point where he had graduated from Georgia, kind of running out of eligibility, and so he throws his name in the portal, ends up at Kentucky. I was rooting for him, and it hasn't gone well early in the season, and it went really, really bad this past Saturday against South Carolina. He was 3 of 10 passing, 30% completion rate. Got yanked in the second half of that game. And as bad as the stats are, if you watched the game, it actually looked even worse. He looks confused, lost, uneasy, unsure of himself, nervous in the pocket, doesn't appear to know where to go with the ball. It was hard to watch at times. Now, to be fair, he was backed up inside his own red zone, it seemed like, for the entire game. And it is hard to get anything going offensively for anybody when you're starting every single possession inside the 10. But boy, he looked really bad. He was benched. I'm assuming he'll get the start again this week, but we'll see. Maybe Kentucky goes with some sort of rotation. But beyond the quarterback problems that Kentucky had last week, to me, the more concerning thing when I watched that Kentucky game is the way they were dominated along the lines of scrimmage by South Carolina. Not that South Carolina is a terrible line of scrimmage team, particularly their defensive front is pretty good. But Kentucky that's kind of been the hallmark of Kentucky over the last several years under Stoops, is having those good physical dominant lines of scrimmage, both offensive and defensive line. Let's be honest. If Brock Vandagriff ends up not being a great quarterback, and it looks like that might be the case, this isn't the first year Kentucky will have sort of struggled through a season with below average quarterback play. But they've always been able to rely on a ground game, a really good offensive line, a good defensive line, great line of scrimmage play to kind of keep themselves in a lot of games, right? And it appears they don't have that this season either. It was really, really bad. If you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about. It just didn't look good. Georgia, on the other hand, is off to a great start this season. They blew Clemson out in week 1, 34-3, beat Tennessee Tech last week, 48-3 or something like that, whatever it was, in a nothing game against an elementary school that nobody watched. Carson Beck's off to a great start at quarterback, a Heisman campaign underway there for him. The running back situation, which was a little concerning heading into the Clemson game, actually looks pretty good now, right? Georgia was missing its top 2 running backs heading into the Clemson game. Etienne out with suspension, Robinson out with a turf toe. Well, Nate Frazier has stepped up as a true freshman, probably the MVP of the game, in my opinion, against Clemson. He really came in and gave that Georgia offense some juice, whereas Robinson was really struggling in the first half. Just a ton of wide receivers, none of which are elite top 10 type NFL draft pick talent, but all of which are really, really good. Whether you're talking about the returning wide receivers, Dylan Bell, Dom Lovett, or whether you're talking about some of the transfer additions like Colby Young, London Humphreys, it's just one after another. They just rotate them in and out. The tight end position has played well early in the year. Brock Bowers off to the NFL, and while there's nobody on the team that's going to replace Brock Bowers, you have Oscar Delp, you have Lawson Lucky, you have the transfer from Stanford, Urasek or whatever his name is, and then you look over on the defensive side of the ball, and it looks like Georgia's just set for another dominant year defensively. Through the first 2 games, they've yet to give up a touchdown. They've only given up 6 points, 1 field goal in each game. Both field goals came late in each game. This is a tough spot for Kentucky, coming off of last week's really embarrassing home loss to South Carolina. And again, that's not meant to disparage South Carolina. It's not even so much the fact that Kentucky lost as it is the score, the way they lost, their inability to really do anything at all offensively. Now, their defense, if you're looking for a bright spot, their defense played okay. I mean, the issue is, I mentioned Kentucky every time they had the ball being backed up inside their own 15, 10-yard line. And, they're going 3 and out. And so what's happening is they're punting from their goal line, right? So South Carolina's getting really good field position at midfield. South Carolina only had 250 total yards of offense in that game against Kentucky. Now, some of that is a credit to Kentucky's defense, but some of it is just because they're getting really good field position on account of Kentucky punting from their own goal line half the time. It was a frustrating game to watch for me as a college football fan, because it was just Kentucky just could not get anything going. I can only imagine how the Kentucky fans felt watching that game. You got to remember, Kentucky was a double-digit favorite in that game, was expected to win that game relatively easily, setting up a pretty interesting matchup here in week 3 with Georgia coming to town, Georgia having to go on the road up there. College Game Day was set to be there this week. They, of course, scrapped that when Kentucky got blown out. They're now in Columbia, South Carolina, watching the team that blew you out host LSU this coming weekend. This game feels like a mismatch. Georgia's a 24-point favorite as of the time I'm recording this video. There's a chance of some rain in this game. I've double-checked with the weatherman. If it rains in this game, it's going to rain on both teams. So it's not an advantage one way or the other for either team. Both teams have to play in the same weather. When this is breaking news to a lot of people that like to blame weather on one thing or another. The weather is going to affect both teams, not just one. But I am concerned in terms of betting this game, Georgia minus 24. And just so you know, I've already bet it, Georgia minus 24. My concern is if it does rain, if it does get muddy, if it is wet, sloppy, whatever, that Kirby and company will do everything they can to limit possessions and just try to get out of there with a win. So not that they can't beat Kentucky by 24. Clearly they can. They beat them 52-13 or something last year, and Kentucky looks worse this year. My concern is that there just won't be enough possessions in this game for that to happen. 24 points is a lot for an SEC conference game, especially on the road. I think Georgia could cover. It's going to come down to the number of possessions, I think. It's possible Georgia wins this game 28-7. Just lack of possessions. It's also possible they win this thing 45-10, which of course would cover the 24. Which is why you need to go over to Prize Picks. Forget betting the minus 24. Just bet on Carson Beck, bet on Trevor Etienne, bet against Brock Vandergriff if you want to. His total passing numbers, whatever you want to do. PrizePicks.com, promo code Uncle Lou. Make sure you check them out. All right, there you go. I think the Dogs will roll. I think the Dogs win big. I do have a bet on Georgia minus 24, but I'm not all that confident in it, to be honest with you. But there it is. That's my thoughts. Hope you enjoyed the video. Click the thumbs up, subscribe if you're not, and I'll talk to you again soon. Have a good morning.